Right now, there's a woman staring at her phone, heart racing every time the screen lights up, hoping it's him. She's successful, intelligent, beautiful, yet in this moment, she's completely powerless. A Greek slave who lived 2,000 years ago knew exactly how to free her. You know this woman. Maybe you are this woman. You can negotiate complex deals, lead teams, manage entire households. But when he doesn't text back for 3 hours, your stomach drops. You construct 17 different narratives about what his silence means. You replay the last conversation, word by word, analyzing tone, searching for the moment you said too much or not enough. Your friends would be shocked to see you like this. Your colleagues would never believe that the composed, capable woman they know becomes someone else entirely when it comes to him. Here's what's fascinating. While you're performing this exhausting mental gymnastics, trying to decode his intentions and control his feelings, you're practicing the exact form of slavery that a man named Epictetus escaped 2,000 years ago. And he did it while wearing actual chains. Epictetus was born a slave in ancient Rome around 50 AD. His name literally means acquired one, not a person, but property. He had no control over his body, his time, or his circumstances. His master, a wealthy freedman in Nero's court, reportedly broke his leg, leaving him permanently disabled. Everything external was controlled by others. Yet this man, who possessed nothing, discovered something so powerful that emperors would eventually seek out his teachings. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, turned to the wisdom of a former slave when he needed to understand true freedom. How does a man with zero external power become a teacher of ultimate freedom? That's the paradox that should arrest your attention, because the answer is the exact opposite of everything you've been taught about relationships and power. While you're monitoring his social media activity, wondering if he's losing interest, crafting the perfect text that sounds casual but isn't, trying to be the right version of yourself that he'll finally commit to, you're giving away the one thing that Epictetus identified as exclusively yours. You're surrendering your power to someone else's unpredictable behavior. And here's what makes this truly devastating. You know better. You know you're doing it. You can feel the exhaustion of constantly trying to manage his perception, influence his choices, secure his validation, but you can't seem to stop. This isn't about manifesting or high-value tactics or playing games. This isn't another strategy for getting him to chase you. What Epictetus discovered was a philosophical revolution so fundamental that it survived 2 millennia, influenced the greatest leaders in history, and contains the specific solution to the powerlessness you feel right now. He identified one distinction, a single categorization that changes everything, and once you see it, you can never unsee it. But before I reveal what Epictetus discovered, you need to understand why 98% of women remain trapped in this invisible prison, and why the solution is the exact opposite of everything you've been taught about relationships and power. Because the woman waiting for that text, the woman replaying conversations, the woman trying to be enough, she's not weak, she's not broken. She's operating exactly as she was conditioned to operate. And that conditioning runs so deep that it masquerades as love, as care, as feminine nature itself. But it's not. It's a cage. And Epictetus has the key. Let me describe your internal world, and you tell me if I'm wrong. You can negotiate million-dollar deals, lead projects with confidence, manage complex responsibilities without breaking a sweat. But when he doesn't text back for 3 hours, you construct 17 different narratives about what it means. You check your phone compulsively. You reread your last message, wondering if you said too much, revealed too much need, came across too eager or too distant. You analyze every word of his previous texts like an archaeologist examining ancient fragments, searching for clues about his emotional state, his level of interest, his intentions. This is your reality, and I need you to hear something important. This isn't weakness. This is conditioning, so sophisticated you mistake it for intuition. You wake up and within minutes, you're checking if he's messaged. Throughout your day, part of your attention is always monitoring his communication patterns. Did he like your social media post? How long between messages? What does his tone suggest? You become a detective investigating someone else's internal world while your own goes unattended. You seek reassurance from friends. Does this text sound cold to you? Outsourcing even your interpretation of reality. You modify your behavior based on his responses, becoming a different version of yourself depending on what seems to generate his approval. And here's the truly exhausting part. You know you're doing it. You can observe yourself in this pattern. You feel the indignity of it, the way it contradicts everything else you've accomplished, everything else you are. The successful woman who commands respect in every other domain becomes someone she barely recognizes when it comes to him. That gap between your professional competence and your relationship anxiety isn't a character flaw. It's evidence of how deeply you've been taught to place your emotional well-being in male hands. Society gives you a devastating double bind. It tells you that relationships are your primary source of value, that being chosen is the ultimate validation, that your worth is confirmed through male desire. Then it judges you mercilessly for caring too much, for being too invested, for needing reassurance. You're supposed to want the relationship desperately while appearing not to care at all. You're supposed to prioritize connection while somehow remaining emotionally detached. The game is rigged, and you've been playing it so long you think the rules are natural law. But they're not. You weren't born analyzing emoji choices and paragraph spacing. You weren't born believing that another person's inconsistent behavior should determine your internal state. You were taught this, and that lesson runs so deep you don't even see it operating. You think the anxiety is love. You think the monitoring is care. You think the constant emotional labor of managing his perception and predicting his responses is what commitment looks like. It's not. What you're experiencing is what Epictetus would call voluntary slavery, the surrender of your emotional state to someone else's unpredictable behavior. And here's what makes this particularly cruel. All that worry, all that analysis, all that careful management of your words and timing and presentation, none of it actually gives you control. The anxiety you feel checking your phone isn't intuition about the relationship. It's the signal that you've placed something fundamentally outside your control at the center of your well-being. Every minute you spend trying to decode his intentions is a minute of your irreplaceable life spent in powerlessness. Every hour invested in becoming what you think he wants is an hour of self-abandonment. The exhaustion you feel isn't from caring deeply. Caring is effortless and energizing. The exhaustion comes from trying to control what Epictetus would categorize as fundamentally outside your domain. You're attempting the impossible, and your nervous system knows it. This pattern has a name in Stoic philosophy. It has a diagnosis, and most importantly, it has a solution. But the solution requires you to completely reverse how you've been taught to think about power and control in relationships. This exhaustion you feel isn't a personal failing. It's the predictable result of violating the fundamental law of power that Epictetus discovered while literally wearing chains. And here's what's fascinating. He identified exactly two categories that determine whether you're free or enslaved. Two categories that, once you learn to distinguish them with absolute clarity, will dissolve the anxiety at its root. Because what you're trying to control right now, what's keeping you awake at night and contracted during the day, Epictetus would tell you it was never yours to control in the first place.
Epictetus never chose to be a slave, never chose his disability, never chose his circumstances. Yet he became freer than the emperor who consulted his teachings. How? He discovered the one distinction that separates the enslaved from the sovereign. Born around 50 AD in Hierapolis, a city in what is now Turkey, Epictetus was sold into slavery as a child and brought to Rome. His name itself tells the story. Epictetus literally means acquired or gained, a label marking him as property, not person. He belonged to Epictetus, a wealthy and brutal freedman who served in Emperor Nero's court. Historical accounts suggest that Epictetus broke Epictetus's leg, whether through deliberate punishment or neglect, leaving him permanently disabled. Imagine that reality. Your body is not yours, your time is not yours, your future is not yours, and now your physical mobility has been taken as well. This was a man who had every justification for bitterness, for resignation, for the belief that life had rendered him powerless. Instead, he discovered something that would echo through 2,000 years of human history. Epictetus was eventually freed, though his exact circumstances remain unclear. What is certain is that he studied philosophy under Musonius Rufus, himself a Stoic philosopher of considerable influence, and began teaching in Rome. When Emperor Domitian banished philosophers from the city in 93 AD, Epictetus moved to Nicopolis in Greece and established a philosophical school that attracted students from across the Roman Empire. He never wrote anything himself, like Socrates before him. He taught through dialogue and lived example. Everything we know of his teaching comes from his student Arion, who recorded his lectures in the discourses and distilled his practical wisdom into the Enchiridion, a handbook whose title literally means ready at hand. This wasn't philosophy for intellectual entertainment. The Enchiridion was designed as a manual for living, practical tools you could access in moments of crisis, confusion, or suffering. And it worked. Marcus Aurelius, who became emperor and the most powerful man in the known world, kept Epictetus's teachings close throughout his life. When he needed wisdom for navigating the complexity of absolute power, he turned to the words of a former slave. That alone should arrest your attention. But here's what you need to understand about Stoicism before you dismiss it as masculine detachment or emotional suppression. That's a complete misunderstanding. Stoicism isn't about becoming cold, it's about becoming strategically intelligent with your emotional energy. It's not about caring less, it's about caring more effectively. The Stoics understood something modern psychology has only recently validated through concepts like emotional regulation and locus of control. You can be deeply engaged with life while remaining unshaken by circumstances outside your control. For women specifically, this distinction is revolutionary. You've been conditioned to believe that caring means constant anxiety, that love means emotional reactivity, that being feminine means surrendering your internal state to someone else's behavior. Stoicism offers something entirely different, the possibility of caring deeply while remaining sovereign. Your relational intelligence, your capacity for connection, empathy, and emotional attunement becomes an asset rather than a liability when it's directed properly. But directed toward controlling him, it becomes your prison. Epictetus's slave experience uniquely qualified him to teach freedom because he had to find it without any external resources. He couldn't change his circumstances, couldn't control his master's cruelty, couldn't fix his broken leg. He had to find freedom in the only place it actually exists, in the domain that remained exclusively his, regardless of chains or disability. And what he discovered there applies universally, but for women taught to derive worth from relationships, it's nothing short of revolutionary. So, what is this distinction that gave a man with no external power complete internal freedom, and how does it specifically liberate women from relationship anxiety? It comes down to two categories that Epictetus insisted we must learn to separate with absolute clarity.
Here is the distinction that changes everything. There are things within your control and things outside your control. Your freedom depends entirely on learning to separate them. And I promise you, you've been placing your happiness in the wrong category. The opening of Epictetus's Enchiridion states this with stunning clarity. Some things are up to us, and some are not up to us. It sounds almost embarrassingly simple, doesn't it? But this single distinction is what separated the enslaved from the free in ancient Rome, and it's what separates you from the sovereignty you're seeking right now. Let me be precise about what falls into each category, because this is where most women get it catastrophically wrong. Within your control, your opinions, your judgments, your desires, your aversions, your impulses, your character, your responses, your values, your choices, and your actions. That's it. That is the complete list of your actual domain of power. Everything else, and I mean everything, falls outside your control. Outside your control. His feelings about you, his choices, his words, his timeline, his past, his emotional availability, his commitment level, his communication patterns, whether he texts back, how he interprets your words, what he tells his friends, whether he shows up, whether he leaves, whether he sees your worth, whether he chooses you, the outcome of this relationship, other people's opinions, your body's limitations, external events, the past, the future. I can feel your resistance already. You're thinking, but I can influence his feelings. I can communicate better, be more understanding, give him space, show him I'm valuable. And that's precisely the trap. You can absolutely take actions within your control, how you communicate, how you show up. But his reception of those actions, his feelings in response, his choices based on those feelings, completely outside your control. And every ounce of energy you pour into trying to control his internal world is energy stolen from your actual domain of power. Here's what Epictetus understood that transforms everything. Anxiety is always the signal that you're attempting to control something outside your domain. Always. That knot in your stomach when he doesn't text back, that's not intuition. That's not love. That's your system alerting you that you've placed your well-being in someone else's hands. The Stoics called this preferred indifference. You can prefer that he texts back. You can prefer that he commits. You can prefer that the relationship works. But the moment you need these things for your internal state to be acceptable, you've become enslaved to circumstances you cannot govern. Let me show you what this looks like in practice, because theory without application is just entertainment. Scenario: he's pulling away. You notice the shift: shorter texts, longer delays, less initiation. Your current approach, the one you've been taught, says, analyze what you did wrong, adjust your behavior, create mystery, give him space but not too much space, remind him of your value, be feminine but not needy, be interested but not desperate. You're trying to control his level of interest through your performance. This is exhausting because you're attempting the impossible. The Epictetus approach asks entirely different questions. What's in my control here? Your dignity, your standards, your decision about whether someone pulling away deserves your continued availability, your choice about who you're willing to be in relationships, your boundary about what kind of treatment you accept. That's your domain. His reasons for pulling away, his feelings, his choices about the relationship, not your domain. Within your control, deciding you deserve consistent communication and respect. Outside your control, whether he provides them. But here's the key that changes everything. You control the consequence. You cannot make him show up differently, but you can absolutely control whether you remain available to someone who won't. Most women ask, how do I make him see my value? Epictetus asks, how do I ensure I never forget my value regardless of his vision? Do you see how radically different those questions are? One places your power in his perception. The other places it exactly where it belongs, in your own hands. Let me address the fear that just arose. If I stop trying to influence him, won't I lose him? Here's the paradox that Epictetus understood perfectly. Releasing control of what isn't yours to control actually creates genuine influence. When you stop performing, stop managing his perception, stop abandoning yourself to secure his approval, something shifts. You become authentically yourself. And authentic self-possession is magnetic in a way that performance never can be. People respect what they cannot control. They're attracted to sovereignty. The version of you that needs nothing from him is far more compelling than the version trying desperately to secure something from him. This isn't about becoming cold or detached. You can care deeply, you can invest fully, but you care about and invest in what's actually yours, your character, your choices, your integrity. Within your control, building a life so fulfilling that his presence enhances it, but his absence doesn't destroy it. Outside your control, whether he chooses to be part of that life. Can you feel how different that is? One approach makes you a reactor to his choices. The other makes you the primary agent in your own life. Every time you replay a conversation, wondering what you should have said, you're attempting to control the past. Every time you worry about what he's thinking, you're attempting to control his internal world. Every time you modify your authentic response to generate a particular reaction from him, you're abandoning your domain to manage his. Epictetus would tell you this is insanity, the voluntary surrender of your only true power. Within your control, whether you text him first. Outside your control, how he receives it, when he responds, what he thinks about it. Where do you currently spend your energy? I'm guessing 90% of it goes to the second category. That's why you're exhausted. You're trying to govern a territory that was never yours. Here's what happens when you redirect that energy to your actual domain. Your self-trust increases. How could it not? You're finally keeping commitments to yourself instead of abandoning your boundaries to manage his behavior. Your anxiety decreases because you've stopped attempting the uncontrollable. Your standards become non-negotiable because they're no longer dependent on him meeting them. They're simply the terms of your participation. And paradoxically, you become far more attractive because self-possession has an unmistakable signature that performance never achieves. The Stoics taught that we suffer not from events themselves, but from our judgments about events. He doesn't text back. That's a neutral event. Your judgment, this means he's losing interest, which means I'm not enough, which means I need to do something to fix it, is what creates suffering. And that entire chain of judgment lives in your control. You cannot control his texting patterns. You can absolutely control your interpretation of them and your response to them. Now you understand the framework, but knowing intellectually that his choices aren't yours to control is different from living in that freedom. So let's talk about actually implementing this ancient wisdom in your modern life, starting tomorrow morning.
Philosophy without practice is just entertainment. So here's exactly how to rewire your relationship patterns using Epictetus's framework, starting with what you do tomorrow morning when you wake up. The Stoics understood that philosophy isn't something you study, it's something you train. Epictetus compared philosophers to athletes because both required daily practice, repetition, and the building of muscle memory until the right response becomes automatic. You're not trying to remember this teaching in moments of calm. You're training yourself to access it precisely when your conditioning is screaming at you to check his social media, analyze his tone, or abandon your boundaries to secure his approval. Here's your daily practice structure, and I need you to commit to this for 30 days. That's the minimum time required to begin rewiring patterns you've practiced for decades. Every morning, before you check your phone, before you do anything else, you say this out loud.
Today, I control only my choices and my character. Everything else, his responses, his feelings, his choices, belongs to him. I will spend my energy only in my own domain. This isn't affirmation, it's jurisdictional clarity. You're reminding yourself where your power actually lives before the day's events tempt you to give it away. Throughout your day, you'll catch yourself attempting to control the uncontrollable. This is guaranteed. You'll reach for your phone to see if he texted, you'll start crafting the perfect message, you'll begin analyzing what his last words meant. The moment you notice this, and noticing is the entire game, you pause and ask one question: is this in my control? If the answer is no, you immediately redirect to something that is. Not later, not after you check one more time, immediately. Let me give you a specific scenario because this is where theory meets reality. He hasn't texted in 6 hours. You feel the familiar anxiety rising. Old pattern: check phone repeatedly, construct narratives about what his silence means, draft and delete messages, seek reassurance from friends, modify your behavior to generate a response. New pattern: notice the anxiety. Recognize it as the signal that you're trying to control his behavior. Ask, what's in my control right now? Answer, your dignity, your standards, your decision about how you spend the next hour. Redirect your energy there. Go to the gym, work on your project, call a friend about something unrelated to him, read something that expands your mind. You're not distracting yourself from the anxiety, you're literally practicing sovereignty by investing energy in your actual domain. When anxiety arises, don't treat it as a problem to eliminate. Treat it as information. It's telling you that you've placed something outside your control at the center of your well-being. Thank it for the signal, then correct course. The Stoics called this discipline of assent. You don't have to agree with every thought and feeling that arises. You can observe it, recognize its source, and choose differently. Every evening, conduct an energy audit. This takes 5 minutes, but builds extraordinary self-awareness. Write down 3 things you tried to control today that weren't yours to control. Then write what was in your control in those exact situations. This isn't about shame. You'll catch yourself trying to control him dozens of times daily at first. This is about building pattern recognition so you catch yourself faster each time. Here's your timeline. Within 72 hours, you'll catch yourself mid-anxiety and realize you're trying to control him again. That moment of awareness is victory, even if you still feel anxious. Within a week, you'll have at least one moment where you successfully redirect your energy without the old pattern completing. Within 2 weeks, you'll notice your baseline anxiety decreasing because you're spending less time attempting the impossible. Within 30 days, this framework becomes your automatic lens for relationship dynamics. You'll face obstacles. Your conditioning will tell you that not trying to control him means not caring. This is a lie. You can care deeply while respecting jurisdictional boundaries. People around you may be uncomfortable with your new sovereignty because they're used to you being anxious and available for endless relationship analysis. That discomfort is their issue, not yours. And you'll slip repeatedly. You'll spend an entire afternoon trying to decode his behavior before you catch yourself. This is normal. Epictetus himself said even sages must practice. The goal isn't perfection, the goal is direction. More energy toward yourself, less toward controlling others. As you begin this practice, you'll face resistance, both internal and external. People are used to you operating in anxious attachment, and your own conditioning runs deep. But thousands of women have walked this path before you, and there's a community ready to support your evolution.
Epictetus gave you the map to freedom. But maps only work when you walk the territory. And that journey is easier with companions who speak your language. This video taught you the framework. The dichotomy of control is intellectually clear right now, in this moment of inspiration. But living it when it's 2 in the morning and your conditioning is screaming at you to text him? When everyone around you thinks you're being cold for maintaining boundaries?
When you're terrified that choosing yourself means losing him. That requires something more than intellectual understanding. It requires community, ongoing practice, and women who understand exactly what you're navigating because they're walking the same path. Inside our private community, women are practicing Stoic sovereignty together. They're sharing wins, troubleshooting obstacles, going deeper into ancient wisdom applied to modern relationship dynamics, and holding each other accountable to the standards they've set for themselves. This isn't surface-level support. These are women who understand that freedom requires daily practice and that transformation happens in community, not isolation. This community isn't for everyone. It's specifically for women ready to stop outsourcing their emotional state and reclaim their sovereign power. Women who recognize that Epictetus' teaching isn't theory to admire, but practice to embody. Women who choose themselves not eventually, but now. Your momentum is highest right now. Don't let it fade into another insight you appreciated but never implemented. Join us, not to become someone different, but to finally become completely yourself. Click the link below to claim your place among women who chose freedom.